And this is actually a bit of a follow-up on last Sunday. We had the picnic and we were outside and we didn't broadcast it. So if you weren't able to join us last week, you're getting a little bit of it here. But we're going to kind of expand on what we talked about last week. And it really comes down to what have you got? And how are you going to focus on it? And it reminds me of the story of these three guys who were sitting around at the general store, hanging out, and all of a sudden their friend comes in. And he says, "Oh, what a week I have had. I lost my glasses, I lost my phone, and then just today I lost my car keys. I had to ride my bike down here. So it was a horrible week." And the other guy says, "Well, that ain't nothing. You got to think about the month I've had. I've lost my job, I've lost my girlfriend, and more than that, I've lost my dog this month." And of course the third guy says, "Oh, that ain't nothing. Now look at the year I've had. I've lost my house, I've lost my wife, and worse than that, I lost my car." And they look at the fourth guy. He says, "That's nothing. I haven't lost anything. I haven't lost anything this year. I still have diabetes. I still have cancer. I still have this trick knee, and I'm still going bald." So, it's all in your what? Perspective, and it's all in your head. And that's the way we can be, can't it? We can sit there and we can be so negative, focusing on the things we have lost, the things we don't have, instead of focusing on the things that we have, the true blessings of God. And that's what we're going to look at. As we talked last week, for those who weren't with us, we talked about the fact that as you look at our life, it is very easy to say, look at 2020. We have COVID-19. We have a political mess. Maybe personally, you're going through struggles. You may have health problems. You may have personal problems. And you say, "I've got this, and I've got this problem, and I've got that issue, and I've got this test, and I've got that trial, and I've got all these things." And we start listing them. It can feel like quite a burden, can't it? I've got all these things on my shoulders. How can I possibly go forward? And we forget that we also have something else. We have what? We have God. So as we go through life and as each day we're so tempted to think about all the bad things we have, all the terrible things, all the things we've lost, and all those things, just whenever you start doing that and your mind starts going that direction, just add at the end of that sentence, "and I have" who? "And I have God." And that's what we're going to look at. Specifically, we're going to look at 4 stories tonight where they had significant issues. They could look at it and say, "I have lost everything. I am completely outnumbered. I am too weak and the enemy is too strong. I am helpless in this situation." And you can focus on those things. And if you were to focus on those, that I've lost everything, I'm outnumbered, I'm weak, I'm helpless, where else are you going to end up other than depressed? In despair, in dismay, right? Thinking about all these things you don't have and all the things, terrible things you do have. But instead, in each one of these situations, we're going to see they came to the conclusion that none of that matters because we have who? We have God. These are very familiar stories. Let's go take a look at them. Let's go to Genesis chapter 50. And the very first story we're going to look at is Joseph. Now, at the beginning of the story of Joseph, what does Joseph have? Some would argue he has everything. Does he have the love and affection of his father? Yeah, in fact, he has also something else to show it, which is what? That nifty coat, right? Got that coat of many colors, which shows his father loves him best. He has a home. He's well fed. He's taken care of. And on top of that, he has a message from God in dreams that God is going to use him, that he's going to be a ruler someday, and that all of his brothers and his parents are going to come and they're going to bow down to him, right? He's got everything. He has it all. Until what? Until his brothers got a bad idea. First they were going to kill him. They said, "Nah, it's too messy. Let's do what instead? Let's sell him. Let's make a few bucks off him." And they sold him to the Midianites, who took him off into the land of Egypt, and he became a slave, right? Now, how easy would it be at that point in your life to focus on the negative? Absolutely. God, where are you? God must have abandoned me. God, what is going on here? I thought you said I was going to be a ruler. I thought you said things were good. He doesn't have his dad there. He lost his coat. He's lost everything. But what did he remember he had? That God had not abandoned him. So he became the best slave he could be and was in fact blessed in that. And he lived happily ever after. No. Because then what? Potiphar's wife decided to frame him and accuse him of something he did not do. And that ended up in prison. And then could you sit there and say, no, God has abandoned me. I've lost my freedom. I had at least a little bit of freedom when I was a slave. At least I was out there. At least I was going to the market. At least I was doing those things. Now I'm a prisoner. There's no way God could accomplish this. Clearly God has abandoned me, right? But what did Joseph say? God has not abandoned me. In fact, I'm going to trust him. And I'm going to be the best prisoner I can be. And then what happened? Pharaoh had a dream. First two guys had dreams, but Pharaoh had a dream. And who was the only one that could interpret that dream? God. Through Joseph, right? That was it. And through that, God did his mighty work, didn't he? He put him in a position he needed to be in order to put him in the position that God needed him to be in, right? And through all of that, he became second in command over all of Egypt, over the entire food system. And who ended up coming, by happenstance, who ended up coming and bowing down to him and seeking food? His brothers. And then his whole family came, and they lived there and were taken care of. Now, his father, Jacob, ended up dying there. And his brothers, as soon as Dad was dead, they're thinking to themselves, oh no, once Dad's gone, then Joseph's really going to stick it to us, going to really remember what we did. But through this all, we see Joseph's attitude. Chapter 50, verse 15. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall you say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brothers and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. Signed, Reuben's father. No, just that's an old Welcome Back Cotter joke. So, because I don't think he said that at all. It just seems to me they're just making this stuff up. It's like, oh, Dad, before his dying wish, we're talking a lot about dying wishes lately, aren't we? His dying wish is that you forgive us and be okay with it. No. But what did Joseph say? Joseph wept when they spake unto him, and his brothers also went and fell down before his face. And they said, Behold, we be thy servants. And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? Is it my job to judge? Is it my job to punish? What's the answer? No, not at all. But as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto what? Good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. That's the attitude we need to have, right? As we may lose things, we may lose our health, we may lose our home, we may lose friends, we're going to lose things in this world. It's a sinful world. It's a terrible place. We're going to lose things. Things that we think are dear. Things that we think we can never possibly live without. But who's the only one we can't really live without? God. And who's never going to forsake us or leave us? And even though things may not go our way, may not go the way we want them to be, can we look at that and say, but I have God. So it's going to be what? Good. So as we look forward and we see, a world with all kinds of problems, things like that, we say, well, if this happens or that happens, then we'll never make it through. Or if this happens or that happens, it's going to be horrible. Just say to yourself, it doesn't matter what we lose. It doesn't matter what evil the world has planned. I have who? I've got God. And the world may mean it for evil, but God means it all for what? Good. And he will accomplish his purpose. So what do? Sit back, relax, and let God work, right? And just serve him through it all. So Even though it may seem like we've lost everything, if we have God, we haven't lost anything, right? So know that God is with you. What about outnumbered? Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 14. 1 Samuel chapter 14, and this is one of my favorite stories of Prince Jonathan, the son of King Saul, who is one of the great characters in the Bible. I mean, just truly an outstanding man of faith. Some of the things he says are just truly amazing. I don't know how you have that kind of faith and trust in God. How many would agree he got the short shift here? I mean, he was not treated fairly if we're looking from human standpoints. It was not fair. But look what happens here in 1 Samuel chapter 14, starting in verse 1. Now it came to pass upon a day that Jonathan the son of Saul said unto the young man that bare his armor, Come, and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side. But he told not his father. Now, why hadn't the Israelites, the Israelite army, the ones with his father and everybody, with all the people, why hadn't they gone and attacked the Philistines? Because they were what? Too many, too fortified. It was impossible, right? So they hadn't done anything. Well, Jonathan says, this is ridiculous. They're the bad guys. We're the good guys. So, hey, armor bearer, let's go take it to them. Verse 2. And Saul tarried in the uttermost part of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in Migron, and the people that were with him were about 600 men. So he had 600 men, and they weren't moving. We're not going to go against that garrison. We can't do it. Verse 3. And Ahiah the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, and son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, wearing an ephod, and the people knew not that Jonathan was gone. He just wants to point out all the bigwigs, all the power of Israel. They were all there, and what were they doing? Oh, we can't do it. We're going to sit tight here, right? Meanwhile, what's Jonathan doing? Hey, armor bearer, let's go do it. Verse 4. And between the passages by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp rock on the one side and a sharp rock on the other side, and the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other Sinai. There's no significance there. Verse 5. The forefront of one was situate northward over against Michmash, and other southward against Gibeah. And Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armor, Come, and let us go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us. For there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. Is there any, if God is on your side, is there any restraint to you? Yes. But is there any restraint to God? None. If Saul had sought the Lord and the Lord said, take your 600 attack, would they have won? Absolutely. If he had 5,000, he said, attack, would they have won? If God had said, Saul, you go over yourself and you go take care of them, would they have won? Yes. Because we have who? It doesn't matter that we're outnumbered. Are there more non-Christians than Christians in the United States? Are there more non-Christians than Christians in Virginia? Are there more non-Christians than Christians in this room? No. Okay. Oof. Good. Just want to make sure everybody's paying attention. No, but it doesn't matter, does it? Sometimes we look at this dark world and say there's just too many of them. But with God, there is no restraint to God by many or by few. I love his armor bearer too. I love this guy. I want to know who this guy is. I want to shake his hand someday. And his armor bearer said unto him, Do all that is in thine heart. Turn thee, behold, I am with thee according to thy heart. Whatever you want to do. Now, that's a little bit of faith too, isn't it? And we know his great battle plan. Remember what his great battle plan was? We're going to stand up and say, we're over here. And if they come to us, we will defeat them. If they tell us to go over there, we will defeat them. I love it. It's a great battle plan. Try that sometime. Because they can look and say, well, we don't have this, we don't have this, we don't have people, we don't have enough armament, we don't have enough this, we don't have enough. They're too many. we have what? We've got God, right? And do we have God on our side? If we are following His will, if we are obeying Him and going His path, then yes, absolutely. 100%. It doesn't matter that we're outnumbered. There is no restraint to God. What about this one? 1 Samuel chapter 17. Who was Jonathan's best friend? David. And sometimes we will look and say, well, we're just too weak, and the enemy is too strong. And that's certainly the case when it comes to David and a guy by the name of Goliath. Was Goliath big? Yes. Yeah, even by today's standard. He was a massive human being. And was he well armed? Yes. I would guess just his breastplate probably weighed more than David did. In fact, how imposing was he? Who in God's army was willing to go out and even talk to him? In fact, what would most people do when he would go down there and he would start blaspheming against God? What would God's army do? They'd hide. Well, maybe he'll die in contact with us. Ooh. Maybe you think I'm calling them out. But little David comes in, and what does he say? What's this guy think he's doing? This is ridiculous. He can't blaspheme God like that. Does he see somebody great? Does he see somebody big? Does he see somebody intimidating? No, because he's against God. And who's bigger? This goes back to my theory on bugs. Should you be afraid of a bug? Because you are bigger than they are. Now, some of them fly, Corey. I realize that. So you got to watch them. They're a little tricky. Sometimes they'll gang up on you, but it's going to be okay. But, what's the big deal? And as we go into battle, we may feel weak. We may think about all things we don't have. I don't have the courage. I don't have the strength. I don't have the ability. I don't have the skills. I don't have the words to say. But what do we have? We got God. And that's why David said immediately, I'll take him. And yes, Saul tried to fit him out with some armor. That wasn't going to work. So what did he do? 5 stones. A slingshot. In fact, look what he said when he faced him. Chapter 17, verse 44. And the Philistine, Goliath, said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. You come over here. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver you into mine hand. I will smite you, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saves not with sword and with spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. That is great smack talk. So Goliath comes with, I'm going to defeat you. He says, oh yeah? I'm going to defeat you and your whole army. Because I've got who on my side? And he gives God all the credit. The Lord will do this. I think he went a little over the top when he said, I'm going to take your head off, because what's one thing that David didn't have? He didn't even have a pocket knife. I mean, I don't know how I expected to accomplish this. But again, with God on our side, it doesn't matter what we have. It is enough, isn't it? And it is more than whatever the other side has. So we can sit there and say, I don't have this, I don't have this. I've got this problem, I've got this problem, I've got this problem. We also have who? God. And is God bigger than all of our problems? Is God bigger than all of our enemies? So, by the way, what did happen? He did cut off his head with his own sword, which is kind of a little dig there. Yeah, but we know. Goliath got so mad, he charged David, and David just took 1 stone. Only took 1. Right in the middle of the forehead to take him down. Cut off his head, And the Philistines did have to run. And the Israelites finally got their courage, right? So again, David didn't look at what he didn't have. David didn't look at what the other one did have. He looked at, I've got God, he doesn't. So who's going to win this? God's going to win. So it doesn't matter if we've lost everything. It doesn't matter if we're outnumbered. It doesn't matter if we're weak compared to the enemy. We've got God, so why worry? In fact, let's go to one more. Daniel chapter 3. Talk about some guys who lost everything. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Daniel. What had they lost? Their home. I mean, they've taken off to a foreign land, losing their great city of Jerusalem, the temple, everything. Everything was lost. But did they ever give up hope? They just continued on. God's on our side, right? We will continue to follow him. We'll continue to obey him. And it comes to this situation where Nebuchadnezzar decides to build a gigantic statue of himself and says, when the instruments play, everybody must do what? Bow down. But many of the Jews did not. And so they picked out 3 of them to note that to Nebuchadnezzar. See, those 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they did not bow down. So Nebuchadnezzar, being the fair-minded man that he was, you got to give him a little bit of credit here. He didn't kill them immediately. He does give them a chance, doesn't he? And he says, okay, next time they play, just go ahead and bow down and we'll forget the whole thing. Won't throw you in the fiery furnace, which was the penalty. But what did they say? Seems pretty helpless though, right? I mean, how do you get out of this one? It's a what? Fiery furnace. In the history of mankind to that point, had anybody just kind of just run around in a fire? Survived a fire? Well, we got suits, but got asbestos suits. They did not. Any of those things, right? It was helpless. Either we bow down or we die, right? And you can sit there and say this is unfair and there's no justice. But instead, what did they say? Chapter 3, verse 15. Now, if you be ready that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, etc., 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 and worship the image which I have made, well. But if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? And does he have full authority to do this? Can he do this? Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar, he will throw them in the fiery furnace if they do not bow down. Verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. Our God is bigger than you, Nebuchadnezzar. You may think you can do whatever you want. But our God can even defeat the laws of physics. He made the law of physics. So you can bluster and you can say whatever you want, but this is not a hopeless situation because we have the one true God, who created the heavens and the earth, who split the Red Sea, who has defeated enemy after enemy after enemy, right? So our God is big enough. And if he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king, either way, either he'll save us from the fiery furnace or he will what? Will die. Is that a big deal? I lost my life. But did I ever lose God? Even when we lose our life, do we lose God? No. So, but if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Period. Because our God is bigger. And we answer to him, right? And of course we know what happened. Oh, Nebuchadnezzar got really mad to challenge that somebody would be bigger than him, right? So he stoked up the furnace so hot that the guys who were throwing him in died. But what happened to the 3 of them? Now remember, their clothes did not smell of smoke. Their hair was not even singed. But you know the best part, other than the fact of not dying? They got to walk and talk with who? There's a fourth one in there. I love that part. It wasn't enough for God just to do a miracle and have him come to kind of walk around and then come on out. He actually came down to, I always get the picture of him saying, "Good job, guys. Man, that was awesome. You should have heard in heaven. Everybody's clapping. Great speech, guys. This is wonderful. Good job." Right? Because is it ever helpless with God? You say, "Well, I don't have this. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't get myself out of this. I can't change this. I can't change that." But who can? So it's never helpless. So when we feel like we've lost everything, or we're outnumbered, or we're too weak, or we're helpless, also say what? And I have God. And is that enough? Don't be like these guys. Let's go to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13, starting in verse 26. Now the God had led his people out of Egypt by his mighty hand, and these people had seen it. They'd seen all of those plagues. Brought them through the Red Sea. These people had seen him bring them through the Red Sea, walked across on dry land, saw him provide water, saw him provide food, saw him defeat the enemy, saw the presence of God on Mount Sinai, heard it, got the 10 Commandments, the punishments too, all this. And they get to the promised land. 2 years it took them to get there. Clothes hadn't even worn out, and they were there, right? Get ready to get in the promised land. Sends in 12 spies. 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad, and 2 were good, right? Look what happened in verse 26. And they went and came to Moses, the 12 spies, and to Aaron, and to all the congregation of children of Israel, unto the wilderness of Paran, to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them, and unto all the congregation, showed them the fruit of the land. They picked some various fruits and things to bring back to them. Again, what have they been eating for the last couple of years? Manna. So this look pretty good. Some fresh fruits and vegetables. This is nice. And they told him and said, "We came into the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey. And this is the fruit of it." It is exactly what God wanted to bless you with. But, verse 28, "Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there." Giants. Giants like whom? The relatives of Goliath. He wasn't the only one. And those 10 spies, 2 did not. Joshua and Caleb were like, "Let's go do it." But those 10 spies said, "It cannot be done." In fact, look at verse 32. "And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants. And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and we were in their sight." In other words, they said what? We are outnumbered. We are too weak. This cannot happen. And they said, "We cannot go in." Chapter 14, verse 1. "And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron. And the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in the wilderness." I wish we died before we got here, so we don't get here, and we cannot go in. What was the problem? They saw what they didn't have. They saw the challenges before them, and they said what? We can't do it. And by the way, could they have done it on their own? Absolutely not. It was helpless for them to do it on their own. But who did they forget to list on their list of things we have? God. But God had promised this. God had said it. God had brought them here. God had done all of those things. In fact, let's go to Psalm 95. Psalm 95, verse 7. And this is also quoted in the New Testament as well. Psalm 95, verse 7. For he is what? Our God. When is he our God? All the time. He is always on our side. He always loves us. He's always there for us. And we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. We belong to him, right? Does he care about us? Today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your heart, as in the provocation and as in the days of temptation in the wilderness, when your fathers tempted God, proved me, and saw my work. 40 long years was I grieved with this generation, and said, it is a people that do err in their heart, and they have not known my ways, unto whom I swear in my wrath, that they should not enter into my rest. That day of provocation, that day of testing, refers to this day, when they looked and said, we can't do this. And they forgot that God was with them. They did not trust that God was able, that God would lead them. This we cannot do, and we do it, don't we? And what do we do when we do this? When we forget that God is on our side. We forget that we are not helpless, that even though we have lost or we don't have or we have problems, we forget that God is with us. We become like them. We become scared. We become fearful and worrisome, right? And what does he say? Remember, I am with you. In fact, last place we're going, Psalm 78. By the way, if you want to read through Psalm 78 sometime, it's quite a read. It's kind of the whole thing, kind of a history of Israel at this time. But Psalm 78, verses 40 through 42. And he says, how oft did they, the people in the wilderness, provoke God in the wilderness and grieve him in the desert? Yea, they turned back and tempted God, look at this, and limited the Holy One of Israel. That's a problem, isn't it? There is no restraint with God. There is no limitation to God. There's nothing he can't do, right? And whose side is he on? So remember that. No matter what we're going through. Yes, we have COVID-19. Yes, we have unrest. Yes, we have politics. Yes, we've got this. Yes, we've got that. Yes, we've got the other thing. And personally, a whole bunch of stuff we've got. And God. Right? Who loves us. Verse 42, they remembered not his hand, nor the day when he delivered them from the enemy. And that's our problem. We forget that God is with us. We forget how strong he is. We forget how great he is. We forget what he has already done, already delivered us from. So remember that. Remember as we look through our life and we say, oh, I've lost this, I've lost this, I've lost this, or I don't have this, or I don't have this, or I've got this. I've got this problem, I've got this problem, I've got this problem. Just remember we also have who? A God that loves us and will do anything for us. He who spared not his own son, but gave him to die for us, will surely give us all things. So be not dismayed. Do not fear. Do not worry. He will uphold us with the right hand of righteousness, won't he? He is for us, and he will never let us down. So trust in him, no matter the situation. And these were pretty dire. These were tough. But what we go through is tough too. We just need to remember God's with us and do not limit him. Remember he's with you and do not limit him. Trust him 100%. He will see us through. Let's pray.